hair is like, I don't know what's happening with my hair today, but we're just gonna go with it. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a February wrap-up video for you. I'm going to be talking through all the books I finished in February. It's definitely a smaller stack than January. I think that's maybe in part because like it's a shorter month by a few days. But also, I don't know, I think I just like wasn't reading as much this month for whatever reason. I don't know why that was. Probably a lot of this video is going to be taken up with the Chronicles of Narnia, which I finished this month, and kind of talking through that. So stay tuned. But yeah, without further ado, here are the books. So the first book or set of books, I guess I should say, that I finished this month was the Chronicles of Narnia. I read The Magician's Nephew last month, and I actually also finished The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in January, but I finished it like literally on the last day of January. So that was actually after I filmed my January wrap-up, so it didn't make it into that video. There are in total seven books in this volume, and I just wanted to chat through each of them. So The Magician's Nephew I talked about last month. It wasn't super, like, it's fine, but it, like, having read the rest of them, I was kind of like it's okay. It's kind of like middling. Like, I wouldn't put it as one of my favorites, but I also don't think it's terrible. And they're also all like, none of the Chronicles is over like 150 pages in its entirety. So like, if you're looking for like a short book to get you back into reading, like these might be a good option because it's like really low commitment and they're kind of fun. But they're not without their issues, which I will get to. So next I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which like, I think it's better than The Magician's Nephew. Definitely like more stuff happens. For all of these, like the plot seems very self-contained in each one. I feel like it's very episodic. So even though it's a continuation, like even though it's a series, it's very much like these are the events that happen here, and well, certain events are referred back to in later books. Like if you didn't read them in order, I feel like you'd probably be fine, because he gives you enough context that like if you didn't know what was going on, like you could probably figure it out. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, like everything was going well. We just have some British children who obviously step into a wardrobe and find this other world. Very like lighthearted, adventurous, good vibes all around, right? We're doing well. So I was then not prepared for The Horse and His Boy, which it like leaves the Pevensies children. I do not know how to say their last name. Their antecedents are the focus of The Magician's Nephew, so like people in their family who they know. And then The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, obviously Lucy is the one who discovers Narnia originally, and then her siblings go with her. The Horse and His Boy kind of completely leaves them for a little while. We are introduced to the land of Calormen, which is like another place. Calormen is like within the same world, but it's not in Narnia. Kind of. So it's like another area like within that environment. I'm like explaining this badly. But The Horse and His Boy picks up with Shasta, who's like a white Narnian who was washed ashore in Calormen as a baby and then adopted by like a native person. I think he's a fisherman, and he doesn't treat him well, and he's basically like a slave to this guy. But The Horse and His Boy begins a pattern within these books, which is like very rich with like exotification and like racist tendencies. These kind of tropes where like darker skinned people are bad, and people with like Arab sounding names are like untrustworthy, and there's just like a lot of like, I could say thinly veiled, but like it's not really veiled at all. Like it's very blatantly racist, and it's kind of disappointing because it's like made a whole like new world and like a whole different place, but you're just giving it the same tropes, and the same like emphasis on like the white Narnians are good and trustworthy and honorable, and like when they fight in battle it's for a good reason, whereas like the like darker skinned peoples like worship a false god. There's just like a lot of stuff that's like very like, as I said, like it's thinly veiled, but like it's not really veiled at all. So The Horse and His Boy, I feel like there are good parts of it. Like I'm here for talking horses, I'm into that part. but like it was really poisoned for me by all the messaging. So yeah, I had a lot of issues with that one, and yeah, I don't really recommend it. Like, I would say if you're gonna read any of these, I would read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, or Prince Caspian, but The Horse and His Boy, that's like where the tide started to turn for me. I was like, we were all good. We just had like British children finding another land. It was very adventurous. I was here for it. But then you hit me with the racism and I was like, no, thank you. So after The Horse and His Boy comes Prince Caspian. At this point, we're still with the Pevensies. This is the last book where Susan and Peter play any kind of role, aside from like a quick reunion in the last book where like everybody comes back. So in Prince Caspian, all four of them are on a train and then they go to Narnia. Kind of like the way they go to Narnia changes every time throughout the books. But in this case, they're all sitting on the train and then suddenly like they're kind of there. Only because time passes differently, like it's been a really long time and they think that they're on this different island, but then it turns out that they're actually at their old castle, which looks so different because it's been so long that it takes them a while to figure that out. Adventure ensues. Aslan shows up. There's more kind of like Christianity and religious allegory, and it's fine. I don't remember it that well, to be honest. Like, that one wasn't one that like really stuck in my head, but yeah, it's kind of like a good triumphing over evil. They have to save Narnia from rulers who are like unjust and don't treat the talking animals well and stuff like that. So that's Prince Caspian. Then we move on to The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. This book picks up with Eustace, who is a cousin of the Pevensey children, and Lucy and Edmund are also there, and they get sucked into Narnia through a painting of a ship on the wall, which, like, I was into that part. I thought that was cool. So they go on this kind of sea journey with Caspian, who is a character we were introduced to in the last book. Eustace kind of has an important character arc in this book. He like starts out kind of like a really unlikable character, like he doesn't get along with anyone, and he kind of just continually wants to go home and is not interested in adventure, and then over time he kind of becomes brave and becomes a better person. I think that's kind of like the bulk of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and I also enjoyed parts of this that talk about their travels on the sea, and all the different kind of elements that they introduce in terms of like the mythology of Narnia, I thought were interesting. That was one of the ones that I rated more highly for sure, because I think it has good development of existing characters, but also brings in some new ones and also some new kind of creatures that are interesting to read about. I feel like where C.S. Lewis shines is in these kind of new types of like fantastical beasts and things that he dreams up. So I enjoyed that one. Next is The Silver Chair, which leaves the Pevensies totally out of it. We're now with Eustace and Jill Pole, who's like just a classmate of his. This one is like, it feels very disconnected from the others, I think. Once we lose the Pevensies, I'm kind of like, where is this going? Like, I was a little bit confused by that choice, but I do like the story of it. It definitely gets darker at this point. I think The Silver Chair is like the darkest one so far, and the most kind of like rife with danger, and yeah, I think it's like the most like adult, even though it's obviously a children's series. I think it's the one that gets the darkest. They go into like the underground world where they meet these kind of like really weird creatures that kind of are like really horrible and give off this very like pallid light, and there's a woman who can turn herself into a snake who wears a green dress, who is an obvious metaphor or allegory for like Satan and the snake in the Garden of Eden. Of course she's female because, you know, women. That one, I believe they have to like save a prince who has been cast under this spell, and then Jill and Eustace end up coming back to our world kind of when their duty has been done, I suppose. And then we have the last book, which is called The Last Battle, and in this one there is an ape who who has like a really toxic relationship with a donkey. It feels so ridiculous when I talk about these out loud. But yeah, so there's this ape who's like really terrible, and he's like always kind of like really gaslighting this donkey, and the donkey is always like, oh no, you're so much more intelligent than I am, and kind of like is walked all over by this other person, other animal. They find like a lion skin, and the ape convinces him that he should wear it, and they should convince everyone that Aslan is returned and use that power to basically do whatever they want. They end up linking up with the Calormenes, who are, you know, the bad black Arab like other figure of alterity in the story, who of course want to do terrible things like use talking animals to do like menial labor like farm work, and plow fields, and basically like create disaster in the land of Narnia and kind of uproot everything that Aslan has created. Eustace and Jill have to come save the day, and then they're also joined by the Pevensies in kind of like a last hurrah like reunion episode moment, and I believe like the original King and Queen of Narnia come back, and it's really like all the characters from before who were meaningful in earlier books, even if we haven't seen them in forever. They're like, oh hey, we're back. And I think that part kind of felt artificial to me. There's also a part in this where the King of Narnia, I'm blanking on his name, but he's literally like, I have this paint, and if we use it, our faces like will look like Calormenes, and then we can blend in and defeat them. So he's basically like doing blackface with all these children, and I was like, can we not? So yeah, again, there's a lot of stuff in here about like kind of worshiping false idols, and this like terrifying like part bird, part beast, like demon that the Calormenes worship, like comes and like eats a bunch of people, and there's all this discussion about like Aslan and this creature being the same, but they're not, and how it's bad to like confuse them because thinking that like it's all just the same god is like basically harmful. So there's a lot of weird messaging, more racist stuff. And at the end, like the narrative kind of fell apart for me. It seems as though Aslan is like unmaking Narnia because things have gotten out of hand, and like everything has devolved to a place where like it can no longer survive in the way that it was. But then he's like, oh, actually, but there's more, and like actually this is Narnia, and that was like the false projection of Narnia. And there's this introduction of kind of like platonic ideals, not like platonic like non-loving, but platonic like Plato, like the philosopher. Yeah, at the end there's just like, there are a lot of things that kind of just happen by magic, but there's no real support for why they should be there, and a bunch of people come back to Narnia, which doesn't make sense because it breaks the rules that C.S. Lewis set out in the first place for the worlding of the series. Aslan, C.S. Lewis, speaking through Aslan, had always said that like once you get to be a certain age, you can never come back to Narnia. So then the fact that he like breaks that rule at the last minute and is actually like, oh, never mind, like you can all be here together. Like there is a reason for that. There's kind of like a twist that I won't give away, that happens in the last couple of pages. But like the fact that he like made a rule and then breaks it and then kind of qualifies it, like it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And the last book was like a little bit of a letdown in my opinion. So yeah, I think my top two are The Silver Chair and The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. But other than that, like a lot of issues in this series in terms of messaging around religion and like racist over and undertones, and exotification and like anti-black, anti-Arab like sentiment. So because of that, I don't really recommend these as a whole. Like I think the first few are okay. Like I would say The Magician's Nephew and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe are not so egregious, but then kind of once you get to The Horse and His Boy, and of course The Last Battle, like blackface, even if it's in a fantasy series, is obviously not okay. And I can't get over, I'm like, if you could make literally a whole other world, why are you just recreating all the issues that we have in this one? Like, there's no need to do that. So a little bit of a letdown, unfortunately. I was hoping for a little bit of lighthearted fantasy and instead got something much darker. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I guess like most of this video is just gonna be me ripping apart this series, so I apologize for that, but I had to go off. So yeah, that was the Chronicles of Narnia. Technically that was the first 5 books I read this month, because there are 7 total in here, and I read the first 2 last month, so that's the first 5 books. The next book I read is Sonata Melodica by Rita Dove. This one I have a hard time explaining in terms of like form and like what it is as a whole. It's also like really bendy, and the cover is really soft, so it's like very pleasant to read, just for that, like those aesthetic reasons. But I'm gonna read you the back because I think it kind of explains it better than I could. So it says, a passionate, eccentric pageant of 18th and 19th century life, this collection follows the life of violinist George Bridgetower, wunderkind progeny of a white European woman and a black African prince, as he travels to Vienna to meet bad boy musical genius Ludwig van Beethoven, inspires his most famous violin sonata, and is subsequently written out of history. So yeah, the whole thing is written in verse, but there are also a series of historical notes and a timeline at the back that like kind of explains in more detail several of the poems. So in some sense, like it is loosely a narrative, like it follows specific characters, but it's kind of like more fragmentary than a traditional fiction book would be. And it's based on historical events, but it kind of reimagines them into a narrative that Dove is working with and kind of extrapolating. In her preface, Dove notes that like it's based on this cautionary anecdote where basically George Bridgetower like hit on a girl that Beethoven was into, and that kind of ended with him like being snubbed and being, as they say, subsequently written out of history. But events beyond that have been kind of altered and changed according to the way Dove wanted to work with him or work with them in her narrative. So it's a really interesting blending of fiction and historical events. Yeah, I love this. Like I thought it was so great, both from a poetic perspective. Obviously Rita Dove is like super well known and well loved in the literary world, but I think also the way she is able to kind of interweave her own imaginings with real history and use that as kind of a springboard to just like write some really beautiful and interesting poetry. The verse styles in this book vary so widely, and there's like a mini play, there are some longer pieces and some shorter pieces, there's rhyming and non-rhyming verse, like it really runs the gamut in terms of poetic form and the way she's using it. So yeah, I highly recommend this. I think my understanding of it would definitely be improved if I had like a background in classical music or more of a detailed knowledge of kind of musical history. If you have any friends who are musicians who are also into poetry, I feel like this would be like a great gift. But I think definitely Dove's notes add a degree of context so that like even if you're not familiar with the history, as I was not, or still am not really, this made me want to learn more. But even if you don't have like a working understanding of all of these events that she's talking about, you can definitely still get a lot out of it. And I would definitely highly recommend this one. It also goes by pretty fast. It's like around 220 pages, so a lot of blank space because it's poetry. It's not like you're reading 225 pages that are like chock full. That said, like it is poetry, so you might want to go through and like reread some of them, or yeah, just like take a little bit more time from section to section. But yeah, I really enjoyed this and I highly recommend it. So yeah, that is Sonata Melodica. So the next book I read this month was Sister Outsider, Essays and Speeches by Audre Lorde. This is one that's been on my list for a really long time, probably a few years now. And I had read one of these essays for a class last fall. I think it's called The Uses of the Erotic. And after reading that for the class, I like went online and ordered it because I was like, okay, I'm not gonna wait any longer. Like, I need to read this now. And this is definitely, like, this is a book that I consider like required reading for like any white person, any person who considers themselves a feminist, or like anyone who's concerned with any kind of human rights or activism. And if you just want to like understand inequality and oppression, especially in a US context, I think this is an incredible place to start. It was written in the 80s, but it is sadly still really relevant. I think she gives voice to a lot of issues of like intersectionality, which at the time were super revolutionary, obviously. She was Black and lesbian and feminist, and a mother. And she talks a lot about the intersections of all those identities and kind of how it has informed her perspective on a lot of these issues. My copy is super like annotated, like I marked this up a lot, and it was a book that I found I had to spend a lot of time sitting with. I journaled a lot while reading this, and I think this is definitely a book that I'm going to come back to again and again. It's not something that like you read through once and you're like, okay, I'm done, like I got everything out of it that I could. But this is definitely, like, I recommend this to everyone, like, so strongly. And I think it's just, like, she gives voice to so many important issues, and definitely, like, a lot of these issues, you know, thinking back to June were, like, and after the death of George Floyd were discussed a lot, kind of, like, you know, in Instagram graphics, and, like, in these tiny bite-sized amounts. But a lot of the kind of online discourse, I think, doesn't leave room for as much nuance and detail as she provides in these essays. And they also definitely like span a lot of different topics. So yeah, I think this is incredible, and I recommend it to everyone. Definitely a 5-star read for me, and I think it's super interesting. If you haven't read it, please read it. If you're my friend and you want to borrow my copy, let me know and I'll send it to you. But yeah, I think this is just so important for everyone, and yeah, I loved it. And yeah, I originally knew Lorde through her poetry, but I think her nonfiction is also so incredible. So yeah, I would definitely encourage you all to read this if you haven't, and also read her poetry and just like support and uplift her written work. She is sadly no longer with us. She died in 1992 because of cancer, but her words are still such an important reminder for all of us, and I think, yeah, I can't say enough good things about this book, so yeah, read it. Okay, so the last book I finished in February was a reread for me. It is The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. This is a thriller. I purchased it originally, I believe, when it came out. I think it came out in 2015. Yes, for once I'm right about the publication date. Yeah, this came out in 2015 and I read it that summer. I recall thinking it was good at the time, and I think I just like wanted to read a thriller and this was on my shelf, so I was like, okay, why not? And I recalled it being like pretty fast paced and kind of like low commitment in that way. Writing really sucks you into it, and so it goes quite fast, even if it is like around, yeah, it's like a little over 300 pages. So I think it goes by pretty fast, and I really enjoyed rereading it. I think it definitely stands up. I don't know that I would give it like full marks. Like I think at a certain point you can kind of figure out like the twist, and you know kind of what's going to happen, but definitely a lot of interesting things going on here when it comes to an unreliable narrator and agency and relationships between women, and kind of the assumptions that we might make about someone based on like how they present from the outside. A lot of this initially stems from this woman who takes the same train every day, and she has this kind of story that she's made up about a couple that live in a house that she can see from the tracks, where they stop at like the signal change. Through the events of the story, she kind of finds that she was really quite wrong about what she initially thought their relationship was like, and this is definitely one to avoid if you have any kind of issues when it comes to domestic violence, violence, abuse, alcoholism, like child death. So there's some dark stuff in here, but I think it's actually manipulated and dealt with quite well. I don't think it's like gratuitous violence. I think definitely there's a good reason, both in terms of the plot and in terms of just the existence of the text as a whole, which justifies why those things are there. I enjoyed rereading it. I don't know if I would like give it 5 stars, but I think if you're looking for a thriller and you haven't read this before, I would give it a try because it goes by swiftly. So if you don't like it, it's over before you know it. So yeah, that is The Girl on the Train. I apologize if there's been a lot of background noise in this video. My mom's been like going in and out downstairs, and sometimes you can hear like the door squeaking. So yeah, I hope that wasn't too distracting, but that is all of it. That is all 5, 6. I guess I did read 8 books this semester. I guess I did read 8 books this month. It's just that like the first 5 were quite short, so in terms of page count, this was definitely less than I read last month. Definitely like a weird blend of like theory, poetry, thriller, children's fantasy. Like I was really all over the place this month. If you read anything super great this month, and if you have any recommendations for me, I'd love to see those. So if you could leave a comment down below, let me know what you're reading. If you recommend it, that would be great. Or also if you've read something that's really terrible and you think it should be avoided. So yeah, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel for new videos every week, and leave a comment down below if you feel so inclined. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!